Hey guys, it's finally time for my full review of the Nexus 5, and in this video we're going to be covering everything you need to know from build and design to battery life and camera. I'll also be giving you my opinions and covering any issues or annoyances I've had with the device. So yeah, here we go. LG and Google have made the bezels smaller on the sides and top of the device, giving the main attention to the larger screen. The bezel on the bottom is still a little chunky, but overall the front looks sleek and professional. On the left side you've got the volume rocker. The buttons are actually ceramic, and while these do have a nice little feedback, they are a little bit sharp. On the right side you have the power button, and underneath that the SIM card tray. At the top you've got a rounded earpiece, and to the left of that is your front facing camera. Right on the top of the device you have a headphone jack, and to the right of that there's a small hole which I believe is a noise cancelling microphone. On the bottom you have two speaker vents, even though it is a mono loudspeaker, so I believe one of these is again a microphone, and you've got your micro USB connection as well. The back of the device is a soft touch plastic, which I actually really like. You can see the Nexus branding and the LG branding on the bottom. You've also got your rear facing camera, but the soft touch plastic in my opinion is really nice and it feels great in the hand as well. Taking a quick look at the camera, you can see it does stick out a little bit, so if you lean it on a flat surface it will be leaning on the camera. The device itself is 130 grams and it does feel pretty light on your hand. So if you have smaller hands like I do, you may struggle getting to your notification shade without kind of rearranging the device a little bit in your hand. It's not impossible, but it can be a little bit awkward sometimes. Now in terms of the hardware specs, you have a full HD 1080p display, a Snapdragon 800 processor, 2GB of RAM, an 8MP camera with optical image stabilization, LTE compatibility, and a 2300 mAh battery. Now the battery is a little bit on the low side, but the rest of the specs are pretty high end, and the only device that's really edging it out in terms of pure hardware is probably the Note 3. Now with the pixel density of 445, everything on this display is crystal clear sharp, and it is noticeable throughout the whole OS. When you're looking at text in the browser, again it is noticeably sharper than when you're looking at it on a 720p phone. I can definitely see the difference, and yeah, it's noticeable every time you turn the display on. Being an LCD screen, it has a more natural color reproduction than say something like the Galaxy S4 with its AMOLED display. It's not quite as rich as the colors on the LCD display of the HTC One, but it definitely does a pretty good job. Now, if I was being super critical, I would say the display was ever so slightly washed out, but I really do mean ever so slightly. While comparing it to my HTC One, which again is an LCD display, the colours were slightly richer on the HTC One, so the display, while being good on the Nexus 5, isn't the best display on the market, but it does do a very good job. Checking out the viewing angles here, you can see when you start tilting the device, some may say to crazy angles, you can see the display kind of washes out. I know a lot of people are interested in viewing angles, but this is actually not bad. It's not quite as good as say an AMOLED display, but it's not bad at all. Brightness is an area I was really impressed with. You can see it's kind of bright out here. It's not exactly sunny, but it is bright, and this is full brightness on the Nexus 5, and it's easily viewable in this kind of brightness. It's actually one of the best devices I've used outside. The camera right now doesn't actually do it justice. It's really visible. You can see it's pretty bright, and you are getting a little bit of a reflection, so you may have to tilt your device around, but the actual brightness level is really good. Moving on to performance, now we're running the very latest version of Android, that's Android KitKat 4.4, and the Nexus 5 is an absolute speed demon. Throughout the UI there is no lag, it never slows down its transitions, apps are stupidly quick to open, it really isn't a question of load times, it's just there. Multitasking again is very fast on this device. Thanks to that 2GB of memory, most of your apps stay open all the time, so it doesn't have to reload them. You'll notice there's a very slight delay when pressing the multitask button, but it's still very fast. In terms of the performance in apps like scrolling in Facebook or Google+, everything is very fast and fluid. There's little to no lag in pretty much every application I've tried. Gaming's another area where the Nexus 5 just excels, mainly thanks to that Adreno 330 GPU. You can see here gaming is very smooth, very fluid. Even in high action areas it really doesn't go below 30 FPS, so games are going to be pretty smooth. I will say if you play more than 15 to 20 minutes at a time you may start to get some thermal throttling, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was on say something like the Nexus 4. Web browser performance again has been improved on the Nexus 5, and that's partly thanks to the Adreno 330 GPU and the Snapdragon 800, and partly thanks to that Android 4.4 KitKat update. Now, things are very snappy, very fast, the page loads really quickly. If you're using a good browser like Chrome Beta, everything is stupidly smooth. You can see The Verge is a heavy website and the Nexus 5 isn't having any problems with it. You can see pinch to zoom, very fast, very responsive. It's not really dropping any frames. There's no white gaps anywhere, no checkerboarding. I will say you can see the touch response is slightly lagging behind, ever so slightly, but honestly, it's a really nice experience to browse on the Nexus 5. So moving on to the camera here, now I think the Nexus 5 actually has a pretty decent sensor inside. Where it gets let down is in the software, and I really think Google need to do something. It still suffers from slow focus times, and even when it says it's in focus and you take the shot, you go to review your photo and you'll see that it's a little bit out of focus. So actually taking a shot that you need to get quickly may be quite difficult to do on the Nexus 5. It's kind of hit and miss. They also added a HDR Plus mode, and while it takes longer to actually take the picture and process it and save it, it seems to be worth it. You can see here, you get more contrast, the colors are more vivid, and overall I just think it's a better shot. So here's the original image I took in normal mode. It doesn't exactly look bad, but it doesn't look too good either. Now here's the HDR Plus shot, and you can see you just get a lot more colors, it's a lot more vivid. Overall, I think it is the better shot, so I would suggest trying to take your shots in HDR Plus mode when you can. One more example for you guys, this is a shot taken in normal mode, and then here is the HDR Plus. Again, I just think the HDR Plus image brings it to life and overall looks better. Now the 1080p video capture is actually a different story on the Nexus 5. It's really awesome and I was really impressed with it. I compared it to the Apple iPhone 5S and I honestly thought the Nexus 5 had the better 1080p video capture. The colors were more accurate and it just looked the better image. Now another really impressive aspect of the Nexus 5 has got to be the microphone. It really has impressive audio quality when you're recording sound. The next clip I'll show you actually has sound directly from the Nexus 5 so you can judge for yourself. Don't be camera shy. Like he doesn't like it when it's in his face. You can see a lot more of the sunlight on the Nexus 5. You're not really getting that on the Nexus 4. Or at least I'm not. Let's go walk inside this tree, see what happens. Now moving on to battery life here, the Nexus 5 has a 2300 mAh battery. I've got some graphs to show you here. The first graph I'm showing you was completely on Wi-Fi, so this is the usage I got. I had about 14 hours usage and you can see 4 hours 21 minutes screen on time. I had about 10% left at the end of the day. On this graph I used 3G the entire day and you can see I got around 12 hours 35 minutes, so 2 hours less than what I was getting on Wi-Fi, but I also got a significantly less amount of screen on time, which you can see right here. It was around 2 hours 45 minutes, so I pretty much lost around 2 hours screen on time, so that's something to take into account. The battery life is better than what we had on the Nexus 4, but it's nothing special. It's not going to reach the same level as the LG G2, which can sometimes get 7 to 8 hours screen on time. So it's okay, it's just nothing spectacular. Yes, it would have been lovely to have a 3000 mAh battery, but Google and LG, for some reason, didn't decide to do that. Now, no device is perfect, so I just wanted to take a little bit of time here and talk you through some of my annoyances, some of the issues I've had with the Nexus 5. The first one is the slight play in the power button. Now, when I first took it out of the box, it didn't have this play, so it is kind of developing here. It's not rattling or anything like that, but it's a little bit unsettling. Now, when I put my case on it, it's a complete non-issue, but nonetheless, it's a bit potluck to how the build quality is going to be straight out the box. The volume rocker, on the other hand, is absolutely solid. I've heard of some people's rattle around when it vibrates. Mine luckily doesn't do that. Now there's a slight gap in between the screen and the side of the device. You can see it here, and what's annoying about it is it fills up with dust. Hopefully you can see this on the camera. There's dust all up in it and it's really hard to get out, and this just gets my OCD going because I tried to get it out and I end up just pushing dust more in there. It's a little bit annoying because it makes the device kind of look a bit cheap. It's probably a non-issue for most people, but for me it's just a little bit annoying, so take that into account. My next slight annoyance is the camera, and you can see, I mentioned it earlier, it does kind of stick out a little bit. So when you're resting it on a flat surface, you're basically resting it on your camera. That's the first thing that makes contact with the table. So if you're not being too careful, you'll probably end up with a nice scratch on your new camera lens. So you will need a case to protect this. Now the biggest issue I've probably had with this device is the mono speaker. And if you just take a look at the bottom of the device, it looks like it has stereo speakers, but it actually doesn't. This side is a microphone. This does not do anything to output sound. And if we press play, I'll show you that. So we'll turn it up. If I cover this side, you can see the audio isn't affected. If I cover this side, it's basically all muted. So it is a mono speaker, and the problem with that is it's really, really quiet. Now this is maximum volume, which isn't bad, but it's not that loud. If you put it around 50%, which is around here, it's only just about audible. Not very loud at all, really isn't. If you go anything below 50%, yeah, you really can't even hear it. I mean, it's a really low loudspeaker. You have to have it around 80 to 100% to even hear it. So that is definitely the biggest issue I've had with my Nexus 5. Now, what makes the Nexus 5 so attractive is its great hardware for a great price. It's available in 16 and 32GB models. The 16GB price is £299, the 32GB price is £339. At that price, it's really hard to turn down the Nexus 5, especially for the hardware it's offering. It's pretty much top of the line hardware, so it pretty much gives you the best bang for buck of any device. So there you go, guys, that's the full review of the Nexus 5. Hopefully that helps you out if you're thinking about buying one of these. Let me know what you guys think as always, and yeah, peace out.